Beloved one, Honolea ich Imzaia e. I am the Pah Kwan Yin San, and I welcome you to Hanasanka, my home. I am making this video in response to all of the beautiful messages that we have received in the last few days, in the last week, I guess, in response to all of the videos that we have been putting out and the information that we have been sharing. All of these things have very much touched our heart and our soul and our beingness. And we are very grateful to see many of you on Imzaia World, but also on our social media engines, responding to these messages, responding to this information, recognizing San, recognizing the truth of that simplicity, and recognizing the truth of Da, love. It was beautiful. So in response to that, I would like to create this video to help you take the next step in these things. And therefore, in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about a little concept we like to call the rivers of San. Now, in I guess it was 2018, I wrote one of the newsletters I was putting out at that time about that particular topic. And I shared a beautiful image created by the Ekara Gaya-san, who is one of the Hana Akeyasans here in Hanasanka. And underneath it I wrote a very simple text, and I'm going to get it to read it to you right now. So in this message that I put out in 2018, I wrote about the Ake'da, the Ake'da, and the Adoka, three of the many rivers of San. The Ake'da is a river or a flow of San that works very strongly with the memory of the now. I wrote back then to remember that the past is not where you live, nor is the future a destination. This is a particular expression of Dahlyn, Ake'da, that works very well with the Head Kakra. The next one I wrote about was Ake'da, the presence of the now. Focus on it and venture far, far from the vibrational lands and habits of mind. One that works very well with the Head Kakra or the Ake'na, but of course also with the other Kakra system. And finally I wrote about Adoka, the bringer of the now. Focus on it and let yourself flow to the truth of who you truly are. So the memory of the now, the presence of the now, and the bringer of the now. These are three of many names of rivers of San, which all are connected to the concept of the now. And underneath I wrote, these are three of the many rivers of San, apparently I'm consistent, that flow through the Head Kakra or the Akonai Da, the Heart Kakra or the Ake'na, and the Belly Kakra or the Adonai Ka. They are always available to stop any vibrational habit from taking you out of alignment with the true self and the all, beyond mental, physical, and vibrational reality. Now, I wrote this back in 2018 as a little reminder, let's say, to help you understand the constant pull towards, as the Yeshua-san would describe it, the past of the self, or the past of the other, or the future of the self, or the future of the other. Very simple concepts, really, that take you out of the simplicity of the now. But to truly explain to you more about the rivers of San, I must take you into the Head Kakra for a minute, and that is why I drew that circle on that board before we got started here today. If you look at the simple concept of the head kakra, and for the sake of this drawing, we will imagine that this is a person's head as seen from above, with the nose being here, a very sharp nose, and the eyes being here, let's say, so the person would look out into reality up. Now, if this is the simplicity of a person's head kakra, namely the space that is around the head, the sphere that is around the head, then, as we have explained already in previous videos, you have a constant influx there of sun, of life force, or love force, or joy force, or any of these expressions coming in through this sort of angle. And as it does, under normal circumstances for a metaphysical being, it simply brings a infinite flow of sun in through the head kakra, which then moves around the head kakra and eventually exits here and goes down into the spiral of the heart kakra and begins the momentum there to fill up the energy of sun into all three kakra systems, being spread out via the heart kakra at that point, via the Ake'da. However, as has been explained to you a very long time ago now, I guess back in 2007, by the Pah Ekara San, many people who enter this Ekara willingly investigate the notion, the concept of Sahvok, of the ego-mind personality construct, as you call it here. And in doing so, under normal circumstances, in complete unconscious settings, let's say, the human being will then create on this side of its head kakra, upon the exit point of the sound flow, the pressure point or the point of tension known as Sahvok, as we have explained in previous videos. However, for beings like yourselves who have become aware of all of these things, who have studied the grand illusions, who have gone through the early study of San, the beginning understandings of the Pah Ekara San's grand illusion study, the sovereign ascension spectrum study, and all of that sort of stuff, where you learn about the creation of the personality and how it is manipulated in a way by the Sahvok mentality and energy. When you become aware of all of these things, something very interesting occurs. Because of the illusory aspect that is ultimately Sahvok, it must make room for truth. And as it does, it moves itself, it moves its position from this point, the exit point of the head kakra, towards the entry point. Convenient, isn't it? So here you could say the Sahvok point is generated when the Ake'yasin accepts the fact that they are on the path of ascension training and are beginning to generate that which we then like to call the new neural net, as it has been called in previous studies, in the study of vibration, for instance, but which interestingly in the study of the Pah, and I guess this will interest a lot of you out there, over here is generated and is called ultimately the point of Ekara. He does have a point. He's always told you. Here you have the point of Sahvok. Sahvok, unlike the Dahlyn expression of Ekara, comes to a conclusion in Ok, and we'll talk about that much more when we go into the language of creation in other videos. and also into Dahlyn itself, therefore. However, what I'll already tell you about it now is that when you see these sorts of expressions, you can pretty much always conclude them to be Atlantean of origin, not Lemurian, or at least not of origin, but last expressed during the Atlantean times, much like Dahlyn was last expressed during Lemurian times. And these 2 points of expression, of course, overlapped several tens of thousands of years ago, as I've said in videos that we recorded in 2015, which was the main reason why we were in the Algarve, of course, at the time, to reactivate those metaphysical potentials that the Lemurian outpost of that point in Europe still had available through the reactivation of the Flower of Life grid. Now, that's a lot of words I threw at you. Go watch my previous videos and then you'll understand that much better. But for now, simply remember that this is a typical Atlantean type expression, while this Ekara would be a typical Lemurian type, an open, expansive expression. Don't forget that the Lemurian society very strongly opted for service to other-based way of life, whereas the Atlantean society very strongly opted for the service to self-based lifestyle, which then generates not a field of radiation and expansion, but a field of ultimately attraction and therefore collapse onto one point. More about that again in another video. However, we're going back to this. So here we have the Head Kakra. We have the Sahvok point, which is the initial point of distortion of sound energy or sound flow, which has now in most of your cases, because you have made these decisions that I've recently seen you write about in your comments and all of that on my recent videos, for most of you, this has now shifted, is at the entry point of your Head Kakra, would be over here if you were me for a minute. As the sun flow enters the Sahvok point, as also has been explained in the Truth of Who, Where and What You Are recently, you get the generation of a pyramid type structure of geometry where 3 points of tension are projected from the Sahvok point. We have told you in the previous videos that this can be seen as the ego, mind, and personality construct, the ego, mind, personality construct, which form the 3 points of tension, the 3 points of manifestation of Sahvok at the bottom of its pyramid, as San begins to be turned into Sahvok, the absence of Va, the absence of flow, Vok, and San is here being twisted into that. So as that happens, and this is how the personality ultimately gets created, really, or what you consider your identity, these points refract back onto the Sahvok point, and to stabilize that, because they want to collapse back onto Sahvok, because it is a service to self-based entity, so it is attracting them. But in order to stop that from happening, it must create what you have previously labeled in the Imzaia material, again via the Pah Kwan San mostly, the pillars of identification. Now, these can be things that very strongly influence your life as an identity, as an entity on this planet. It can be expressed as a pillar of identification, can be expressed as repetition, authority, gender, lack. We have spoken about these a great deal in the SAS technique, or the Sovereign Ascension Spectrum technique that we have recently begun re-uploading to the website. These are not so important for this conversation, however. Just remember that these have great influence over the choices you make and the reasons for those choices in the subconscious especially. Now, as those points get stabilized by the pillars of identification, this pyramid closes itself, and this field, as we have explained before, ultimately is known as Lavat. Again, a Atlantean, or at least last used in Atlantean, the again closing down of Va from Vok to Vat. Now, that is all you need to know about it at the moment. However, it is what your further reaching scientists these days are calling the holographic nature of reality, ultimately. This would be their two-dimensional disk that they're continuously looking for, and however it is a triangle, don't tell them that yet. This would be their two-dimensional disk, or triangle in this case, that they are constantly theorizing about, that must be generating the third density or three-dimensional reality, time, space, etc. And they are right about that. However, it doesn't exist at the edge of the universe as they think it does. It exists, however, at the edge of your universe, as they think soon it will to be. Now, as the sun then flows through Sahvok, gets twisted, Va gets twisted into Vok and into Vat, which some in the West will recognize as VAT. I'm just kidding about that. Into Vat, then it begins to leave the Sahvok pyramid of the ego-mind-personality construct and comes out, as we have described previously, as the flow of Ma, or full-blown illusion, full-blown three-dimensional reality with all of its grand illusions of form, of time, of space, of exchange, of death, and of separation, which then build out here only, and that is therefore the field of your experience, you could say. Ironically, looking from the Kakra system, the field of experience is very much in line with what Plato taught when he discussed his cave and the identity of mankind, observing the shadows on the wall instead of seeing the true world outside of the cave. Look that up if you don't know that story yet. But in a way, that is literally what is happening here, because in this entire area, if you will, you have the projection of all of your illusions, and this flows through your Kakra system in preparation. Normally this would only begin to happen here, but as I already told you, for Ake'asans on the path, it begins to happen in the early stage here already, but ultimately in preparation to try and hit the heart Kakra, which is the basis and the core of the Kakra system itself. Ultimately, to manifest, as we have explained before in other videos, the chakra system and everything that comes with that, physical reality, finiteness, what have you. But in the Ake'asan status and beyond, you have this happening in this way now. However, this is why we are working on the study of the Pah. Here you generate the Ekara point, and when this point is met with Ma, full-blown Ma, it generates a geometrical structure again, in this case ready to convert the process that has happened here and render it meaningless, basically, and to ultimately convert the Ma energy or the Ma flow back into Sun, so that it can begin to enter properly the heart Kakra. In order for the Ekara point to manifest this conversion, it takes what you have known as the pillars of identification, and it turns it into catalysts. Now, these catalysts are fundamentally based on love, joy, and freedom, purely on Da, Ba, and Fa. The point itself ultimately being generated by Ra, by truth, which, for those of you that know Ekara, you'll understand that that's very important to that being. Anyway, I explained to you all of this to understand the complexity that is presented in the study of vibration. And the study of vibration has been long since available, since 2005 for Dutch-speaking people, and since 2007 for English-speaking people. And as you know, even though this organization, this Imzaia world, has gone through many iterations and many moments of chrysalis and rebirth, ultimately throughout the years, all of this material that helped you understand all of these flows here, that we will go into a little bit deeper at some point still, because I am not done talking about that area just yet. All of that has been made available since 2007 to you. However, it is a very complex system as it appears to the observer, of course. So complex even that the consciousness of the observer usually simply fades all of that out, zones all of that out, and simply accepts the illusion of the reality that is then presented. However, as I said, I have been very appreciative of all of the messages that you have been sending in, your willingness to explore San, to explore the Pa, and all of that. As such, I want to help you understand that it is rather easy, all of this, that we have now explained in great complexity. There is great simplicity to avoiding all of this. At this very moment, that is possible for you. Let's talk about that. So here we once again have the Head Kakra. Now I have, let's say, put a person in the middle point here of the Head Kakra, so you have to imagine it as quite a vast space that reaches around you, but is still quite finite ultimately. And as the Pah-San has also explained to you, in order to manifest the Ekara point, we think of each Kakra system, the head, the heart, and the belly Kakra, as being dividable into 4 quadrants. To make it easy, I have simply given you a schematic here. Again, the person is looking that way, all right, upward here. So here you would have obviously the first quadrant, second, the third, and the fourth. Now, usually, as we have said before the person is aware of the Ake'asan status and actually pursues this appropriately, the Sahvok point can be seen to manifest, depending on the person, depending on the generation, on the edge of the third and the fourth quadrant here. Sometimes this can even go very high up into the fourth quadrant, right by the edge, which you often see with younger adults. However, with the Ake'asan student, the Sahvok point manifests in the first quadrant, because the Ake'asan student is on the early steps of beginning to work on the Ekara point in the fourth quadrant. So here in the first quadrant, and in the second, and in the third, and in the fourth, is exactly where you can work with the rivers of San. As I said in that message from 2018, in that newsletter, the rivers of San are always available to you and give you the opportunity to override this Sahvok system of vibrational reality, of finiteness, of mind, ego, and personality construct in the blink of an eye, with the willingness of pure will and the consistent and continuous approach that comes with being an Ake'asin. And in order to do that, in order to generate those rivers of San, you focus, as we have explained to you in the recent videos, you focus on the active ingredients of San. I think it was in 2015 in the Algarve that I was preparing back then to teach you an exercise known as the 5 breaths. And these 5 breaths, ultimately, they're more than 5, but the first 5 is where the early student begins to practice consistency. The first 5 breaths are simply the breathing of the active ingredients of San through the head kakra. Let me explain. Imagine that you are simply still within yourself, or quite the opposite, that you are extremely volatile in yourself. That entire parameter, none of that is important, because this will work in any situation that you are in. You take a moment to be with yourself. You focus on the first quadrant here, first quadrant of the head kakra, and you bring love into the equation. And you do so by focusing on the Dahlyn expression, Ake'da, Ake'da. This would translate, I guess, if you can translate such a thing, into I am love, you are love, we are love, all is love, that sort of thing. Most every Michael Jackson song, basically. This can translate into Ake'da. Now, I'm not inviting you to focus on this mentally, of course. This is something that you can repeat in your mind over and over again, but that is not what we are talking about. I am inviting you to invoke within the Kakra system the Geotrinity of Dahlyn, the expression of Ake'da in this area, the first quadrant of the head kakra. And what I mean with Geotrinity is the following. I'll come back to this in a second. This is the same that I already explained in one of the earlier videos. Every expression of Dahlyn manifests through the kakra system in the form of a particular geometry. It uses magnetics to do so. It converts, if you will, if such a thing, this is an English word, don't take my word for conversion, but it transforms San into, it uses love to do so, into magnetics, and then into geometry. It compresses that into geometry, and that then expresses itself, in this case, through the head kakra in the first quadrant in the form of a triangle or a pyramid, but to keep it easy, we're talking about a triangle in this moment. And this is what we call the Geotrinity of Dahlyn. It means effectively that the Dahlyn expression uses geometry, geo-holographic geometry, to be more precise, more about that at another point. And it expresses that in a trinity of itself, which then begins to manifest and cool down almost into the lower energy level, material level, etc., or gravity level as it is then called often. But this geotrinity of Ake'da would manifest as the K and Da. Now, as you know from previous videos, Da obviously being the expression of love, the interior expression of love prior to its expression into the field of experience where it would turn into Imzaia. I'll come back to that in a little bit. Or effectively being one of the elements of creation, as I've taught you, that also work with the Kakra system. And as I've explained last time, here you have Ke, which ultimately is Ka, life force, expressed through the Head Kakra. So this is the geotrinity that would manifest when focusing on this particular river of sun, Ake'da. Now, this is ultimately therefore love. In the next quadrant, and this is another river of sun that we haven't discussed in that newsletter, Ake'ba. So in the first quadrant, where the energy of Ake'da is generated, you continue to focus on that geotrinity expression, that expression through the Kakra system, until you truly, well and honest, feel that expression of love not only right here, but also immersing yourself completely, your entire being. It would be the first step to move away from the expression of the entity and into the expression of beingness. Ake'da. Once this river of sun is fully established, if you will, and you can, of course, already work with this as much as possible as you can at home or wherever you are in the world at any given moment in time. But direct student and private students of Ascended Life, of course, practice this in greater detail in the time to come in the form of Pah, the practice of the Pah, which ultimately we also hope to share with all of you via Imzaia World. But once, as you can begin to work with this at home, once you feel this presence of love fully established in your beingness, and then therefore you can be guaranteed, of course, that it is also here in this part of the Head Kakra, you move on to the second quadrant. This is where, after the full establishing of the element of Da through Ake'da, the river of sun known as Ake'da, in the first quadrant, you begin to focus on the concept of joy, Ba, and in this case the river called Ake'ba. Ake'ba can be seen as the bringer of a state of continuous contentment in the now, continuous presence of love and joy, as it contains both. You begin to focus on this in the same way than the previous geotrinity that I explained to you, until you feel your entire being fill up with this. All of this may take a little bit of getting used to at the beginning, but you will very quickly see that with some practice, this is simply a state you continuously invoke, and not something that you have to remind yourself of and bring yourself back to each time. When we move out of the first and second quadrant and move into the third quadrant, we move into the state of freedom. which is expressed in the third quadrant in Ake'va. Now, Ake'va is a state that contains both love and joy in such a continuous basis that it brings forth this great sense, this unrelinquishing sense of freedom that is unstoppable, no matter what scenario of the mind or of Sahvok you may find yourself in. Once that breath or that river of sun has been fully established through the breath, you move on to the fourth quadrant, where the focus is truth. Which is expressed in the rivers of sun as Ake'ra. Now, you see why we explained earlier in this particular diagram why the Ra point is formed in the fourth quadrant. So anyway, love, joy, freedom, truth. Four simple flows, simple rivers of sun, Ake'da, Ake'ba, Ake'va, and Ake'ra, that ultimately begin to build up to such a state, love, joy, freedom, truth, that there is a transformation of the Ma into the Ekara point, and the reactivation of sun flow emerges from the Head Kakra that it initially entered, as it should. And as it does, as it comes out of this Ekara point and enters into the Heart Kakra, it generates the field of Ake'ka, the activation of life force as it exists within the grounded, within the physical being. So Ake'da here in the first quadrant fills you up, brings you to this state of love, begins therefore the removal of all concepts of identity, all of the silliness, all of the nonsense, all of the desire to identify, begins to remove that and dissolve that from the Sahvok point. That naturally leads to being, as you will see when you practice this on a regular basis, to a state of joy, wouldn't it you? As it does, the Ake'ba, the state of joy that gets activated within you, that is built on the significant presence of love, obviously is going to lead you to this next expression of this river, Ake'va, freedom. A great sense of freedom comes with the full acknowledgement of the continuous presence of love and joy in one's beingness and one's world. That sense of freedom cannot help but bring you to the point of Ake'ra, the activation of truth, as more and more of these grand illusions of Tak and Bak and all of these things, which we haven't spoken about, all of these grand illusions that you currently know as form and time and space begin to wash all of that away. All of these personality expressions begin to move out of the way. Ake'ra, that point leads to the manifestation of a new sense of life from within the heart space, Ake'ka, a river of sun, which is very important, as you will come to learn, because we have spoken before about Dahlyn, the metaphysical expression, being a conduit to communicate between beings of all sorts of densities or dimensions or expressions or worlds or times or what have you. And Ake'ba is eventually what establishes that presence between those beings that makes it actually possible. So anyway, simply by focusing on these geotrinities, and if that is too difficult for you at the beginning, I can understand. This might be the very first video you ever found of our work. Simply by focusing then on the notions of love, joy, freedom, truth, and life, you can activate these rivers. You can activate this sun flow once again and ultimately completely bypass the Sahvok-based ego-mind personality states. And when that occurs in your world, you as the early student on the Pah will strongly begin to see the effects in your inner world most of all. However, as I said earlier, the direct student of Ascended Life that practices Pah, which we not only hope to begin to present here soon to our direct students again, but also ultimately to all of you, that person will begin to not only have an effect on their internal world, but will also begin to see the finiteness of illusion, the grandness of all of the illusions, fall away for the simplicity and the elegance and the humbleness, at the end of the day, the simplicity of truth. So I think that I will leave it at that for right now. We'll obviously get back into this. I invite you to practice what I have spoken about here today. And as usual, I strongly invite you to report back to me the things that you have experienced. You can do so via Imzaia World underneath this video, or of course also on social media where this will be posted as well. And based on that, we'll look at the questions you may have, the commentary that you may make about this, and we'll just take it from there. So, beloved Imzaia, I thank you for your attention to this moment, for your focus on the rivers of San. As always, I remind you that you practice these things not to merely improve your own conditions, but the conditions of the whole itself. That is why you are here, in service to the whole as an Ake'yasin on the Pah. Until next time, I am the Pah Kwan Yin San. Honomea I Imzaia.